Okay then, so I'm on my way back to Anchorage from Homer, and just now my bike, first ever problem, started like misfiring in some kind of way. It's the day after dusk to Dawson, here in Dawson City, and I've had to get up pretty early today because the wildfires here on the way to the top of the world highway were closed most of the day yesterday. Today they are open at the moment. They weren't when I woke up at 6:30, they were not open, but about 10 minutes later the highway did open. But like yesterday, it's expected to only be open for a few hours or something. And also, the later I go, the more of a queue there's going to be for the US border into Alaska at the end of the highway. So I need to get going really. All packed up, bike ready, go. So I left the bright sunshine behind me and headed into the smoky clouds, which got worse and worse. I've been told many times about how beautiful the top of the world highway is. I can't see anything. I mean, visibility down the road is bad itself, but views, not a chance. Crazy. Quite a while to go yet as well. But after another half an hour and 30 or so kilometers, I left the smoke behind and I saw why this highway was named the top of the world. The road is actually only open during the summer, and you can see why. Even now there's still plenty of snow at the top. I am in Alaska. Wow. It's that was always kind of like the main goal in a way of the Americas, Brazil to Alaska, and here I am. Phew. The border was easy but interesting, because he asked me, have you not used your visa for a while? And I said I arrived in Laredo, Texas a few months ago, and he said that they hadn't stamped me in, and he said it's not legal until that happens. So he stamped, and it now I have a stamp from June 21st until December 21st, so I've got 6 months from now, which solves any problems about anything else. So yeah. And so the beautiful drive continued, now in Alaska. It was just 60 kilometers to the first very special town. Chicken community. Yes, I've just arrived at a town called Chicken. Here we go. I don't think the town is named after the big statue. I think that's come after. This had been the site for yet more gold extraction, hence this giant dredging machine. The town of Chicken might once have been a busier place during those times. Now it's just full of chicken related things. And with a road that's only open during the summer, some patches of it were absolutely terrible. But finally I arrived at Tok, and I stayed at the same campsite as 3 other motorcyclists who'd been to dusk to Dawson. They invited me to have dinner with them at the campsite. They cooked a great meal, and one of them even invited me to stay with him and his family in Anchorage. I'm now on the road from Tok to Anchorage. Quite a long day of driving actually. Almost 5.5 hours. It's long for me. But I just took a little stop here. There's I don't know, is this a huge wildfire? I'm still learning about what wildfires are like around here, really. I've never experienced them anywhere else in the world, really. There was some in British Columbia, Yukon, obviously, and now this one behind me. It looks quite dramatic with the mountains behind it, and it spreads quite a long way, the smoke, at least on the other side of the highway. Yeah, it looks pretty grim, but you can just about see in the video there a helicopter dropping, I believe that's fire retardant, onto the trees, and hopefully they can sort it out. The drive to Anchorage was wonderful, but after a couple of nights there, I continued on towards the town of Homer, and the roads got even better. On the way though, I stopped to see some of the salmon fishing that is so common here. There are so many in the rivers that the quotas for Alaskans are very generous. Of course, as I continued on, I went through a little bit of rain, but soon arrived in Homer. Just arrived at my couch surfer's place in Homer, and the grass was a whole lot lower than I thought, so my bike fell when I leant it over on the stand. I can't pick it up. I've got to take a box or two off. With the right technique, someone of my size really should be able to pick up a bike like this, even with it fully loaded. I had surgery on my knee a couple of years ago though, and it still doesn't feel right, so I just had to take some of these boxes off. Homer is the last big town on the end of the peninsula, pretty much the end of the road this way. Sally, my wonderful couchsurfing host, took me into town to see what was going on. There are cute little cafes, restaurants, souvenir shops, plenty of people fishing.
There's a last boardwalk. It's the last boardwalk. Okay. After the last boardwalk, go to the next restrooms. That's where the place is. Okay, on the opposite.
And a very unique bar. The ceilings, the walls are covered with $1 bills. People sign them, add messages and stick them there, and then once or twice a year they're all collected and given to charity. It was a glorious day, the perfect day to stand outside with a drink and listen to a band. With all the fishing that's going on, they have some special stations where the fish can be instantly prepared. One person there, though, was from the Department of Fish and Game, inspecting and cataloguing all the fish. Sally happened to know her, so we had a chat, and she taught us about some of the things she does.
Now we're inside of the skull. Here's the brain. And on either side, there's two little pockets. And there's one.
What's it attached to?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Because you know, it's not like you have to, you just give it a tug and it comes down.
Yeah, so it does have some kind of attachment tissue here. And as far as I'm aware, this is likely how it's, receiving information and probably the basic elements that allow that otolith to grow. And it also sits in some kind of probably some kind of like cerebral fluid in there, so it is encased in liquid. And that's the black rockfish otolith. So if you compare it with a halibut otolith, they're really unique and different. And one of the really cool things about otoliths is that all species have otoliths that are unique. So if you didn't have the fish in front of you, and you just had the otoliths, you could theoretically determine what the species was just based on the shape of that otolith. So we've got a black rockfish and a halibut.
And if the halibut is bigger, is the otolith bigger?
Halibut are a little unique in that their otoliths are not always representative of the size of the fish, but black rockfish and rockfish in general are much more representative of that. So, typically if we see a really large black rockfish otolith, we know that that's probably a pretty old fish, and it usually comes out of a larger fish as well. But there's probably a pretty wide threshold.
It was a great 2 days in Homer, but then it was time to head on again. Okay then, so I'm on my way back to Anchorage from Homer, and just now my bike, first ever problem, started like misfiring in some kind of way. So I pulled over, and then I've tried to start again, and it won't start. My first thought is fuel. My fuel gauge stopped working ages ago in Nicaragua, so I've always been calculating each time I stop how much I need based on how many kilometers I've just driven on that tank. And I didn't quite fill the tank up on the last stop, so I'm a bit short of my normal range, but I'm way short of how much I should be able to do. I've done 200 and something kilometers, 270. Full tank I should be able to do about 340. So even if I'm 2 or 3 liters short of that, which I guess I could be, then that's 40 liters. It's getting close actually. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is hail down someone to give me a lift to the next gas station, which is only 8 kilometers away. Fill up my spare tank here, get another lift back, and hopefully that's all it is. I hope, but I also think that that's all it is. So yay, let's hail down someone and get a lift. Slight plot twist. Only the third car that I waved down stopped for me, and they said, sorry, we don't have any room, but we can get some gas for you. Amazing. So I'm stood here waiting by my bike. They've gone to fill up my little thing with fuel. Then they're going to come back and deliver it to me, and I'll give them some money, obviously. So now we just cross our fingers that is the problem with the bike. So the kind people in the car didn't let me pay for it, which is extra nice. There's a lot in this little tank. I mean, this red thing. I don't mean in my actual bike tank. Let's hope that's enough. 1.3 gallons, 5 litres. Alright, fueled up. Gonna start the bike. Fingers crossed. Alright, here goes. It's working, it's going. It was a huge relief to discover that it really was just the petrol, and it was an even better feeling to get to the next station and fill right to the top. Let's make sure we put plenty in this time. And the next day I met up with some more motorcyclists from dusk to Dawson, but this time it was for a very different adventure. Tom here had built his own hovercraft, and he and his friend Paul were going to take me out for a ride.
And it blows into the bow chamber, which is separate. So I can blow out the bow chamber and lower the nose and help turn and make it stop. Well, that doesn't look too bad. Oh hell, I expected there to be a lot more water in here than that. Yeah, that's good. Go away.
What a ride, so incredibly smooth, if a little noisy.
Forgot I parked.
It was apparently lacking power though, so we made a stop after a short distance and Tom made some adjustments. And then it was back skimming across the water and the gravel banks up the Knik River towards the Knik Glacier. Whilst it might seem like quite a random thing to do, both Tom and Paul were aviation engineers lecturing at Alaska University, so actually this wasn't too strange a thing to be doing. As we approached the glacier, it was quite amazing to see some small ice blocks floating slowly down the river. For safety, we didn't go too close to the glacier, and instead we made a stop and went for a little walk up the gravel spit. Some people take an easier but far more boring way to see the glacier, although strangely this plane didn't actually land. And then it was back on the river heading home again. Loading the hovercraft again was a slightly trickier task. I really did my best to help, but I didn't really know what I was doing, unfortunately. The best I could do was be a counterweight on the trailer. After a remarkable few days in Alaska, it was time to leave and head back towards Canada.